This is the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Weekend Outlook from Friday, September the 4th through Monday, September the 7th. Okay, so in the last forecast we talked about the possibility of having a strong northeast or east-northeast wind event along the southeast region, and that was in part by this high pressure dropping down to the north, from the north to the northeast United States and building a northeast flow down the coastline. So what we're seeing right now is we have a little bit of a weaker high pressure than anticipated at 1020 millibars. Now if it does build to 1022 or 1024, we could have a little bit more high pressure to be able to increase the gradient down the coastline. But this one's going to be more dependent on cooler air. And the cooler the air mass over the warmer waters, the stronger the winds can accelerate, especially along the Charleston area. But we have a couple of factors. Number one, we have this trough or this frontal boundary to the north that's sort of preventing a clean flow. What we have is we have air sinking, and then it's having to go along and then sink over this trough, so we're not getting the cleanest flow off of this. And as it comes down, right now it's coming down the coastline, and what we're going to see is sort of a bend today from the east southeast or southeast off of that. So we're not going to see that northeast flow, but we'll see some of the effects today behind the remnants of Erica, which are out here. And so we're not going to see much of a gradient there. Now this low pressure that developed off the Great Lakes will just further this sort of pattern along the boundary. And what we're hoping is that this high pressure will really bite into it, fizzle it out, and get a nice northeast flow going. But it's really going to be dependent on the cooler air mass, and we call that the cold air advection process, where we have cool air coming down the coast over the warmer shelf waters, which creates a temperature gradient. And then as it gets to the land and sea interaction of our barrier islands, it really accelerates the winds because of the difference in temperature between the cooler air and the warmer air mass. And then we have accelerated winds along the coastline, specifically to our barrier islands. So that's what we're going to be really watching for on this event. So if we look at what's going on right now on Datascope from weather flow, very light westerly land breezes going on this morning. And let's take a look at the models. I want to see real quickly if they're in agreement with what's going on with the east southeast or southeast wind, and there we are. So we have our highest resolution model, which is 3 kilometers, saying easterly winds for today, and then we also have our just slightly less high resolution model saying southeast. So we're going to figure about an east southeast to southeast flow for today at or below 10 knots. We may have a couple of burst into the low teens along an east flow. If it's southeast, we'll probably stay down at or below 10 knots during peak heating. So that's what we're looking at for Datascope. If we look at our statistics for the month, we definitely see more of these east-northeast events as we get closer to fall, this cooler air events spill down the coastline. And we look at 93% coming above 9 knots. 56% of the month we see greater than 13 knots, and 26% and above for 17 knots, and then 7% above 22 knots. And that's just during the daylight hours only. If we go to 24 hours, we see those numbers increase a little bit just due to some of the nighttime events that happen, but we don't really include those in. We stick with the daylight hours. So let's take a look at the air temperatures, the air temperature forecast for today, and we're looking at mid to upper 80s. And that's what's going to keep that gradient on the lower end, because the temperatures are going to be above the water temperatures for the most part. And especially on the southeast wind, we're just going to have some very gentle true sea breezing at or below 10 knots. And then as we get into Saturday, if we notice the air temperatures coming up still above the water temperature levels, so we're not looking at a very strong gradient there. Even if we get those northeast to east northeast winds, it's going to be modest. We'd say low teens. I would say 11 to 15 knots with some potential for a stronger build. Should some of that air cool a little bit and we stay on the lower end like this model here, we could see a little bit of a build. Now as we get into Sunday, we see those air temperatures drop off even more, and this is going to be where we have the better chance for a stronger build along the coast along this northeast wind. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but we could probably be safe saying 12 to 16 knots just based on that very mild temperature gradient. Now if we get to about a 4 or 5 degree, like the Canadian yellow model here, 4 or 5 degree difference, that could bring the winds up several more knots. So we could be looking at a 15 to 19 knot backdoor east-northeast sea breeze on Sunday. So if we get that cooler air plus the backdoor sea breeze effect along the coastline, we could see Sunday peaking out. And as we get into Monday, of course, things start to settle back down. We should see that northeast wind start to fade out, probably be back to 10 to 14 or 11 to 15 knots. Okay. I want to take a quick look at the tropics. Let's see, here's the surface flow for Erica, and she is just, I say it, it's really just a blob of activity or an area of disturbance at this point. And what we're looking at is a barely held together surface rotation. And if we look at the higher levels, she really, when Erica came off, the remnants of Erica came off the coast yesterday, looked very impressive on radar and looked very well held together until these westerly mid to upper level winds got to the remnants and really tore the cloud tops off. So there isn't really much left of the cloud tops anymore. And there was an explosion of convective activity, but all of it got blown off to the east. And if we go even higher up, we see that westerly upper level shear really takes off and will not allow further development. I'd be very surprised if the remnants hold together. If you look at the visible satellite, you can't even really see what's going on. There's a little bit of an area right here. That's what's left of the remnants. And if we look at the rainbow tops, you can see all this cloud activity moving off to the east, and that's driven by the mid and upper level winds. Okay, so quickly look over at the Atlantic. We have a disturbance, a tropical wave coming off of Africa, given a 40% chance next 48 hours and 60% chance next 5 days. Here's Fred. Fred's heading off to the northwest, expected to fizzle out and die off. It's getting into much cooler waters, upper level shear, and not going to make it. So this wave right here does have quite a impressive look to it as it comes off the coast. Lots of convective activity. It's right along the intertropical convergence zone. There's plenty of moisture feeding in. We also look at the rainbow top. You can see some of these deeper, darker colors that are the convective feed. If we look at the Saharan air layer, we see Fred right here spinning off, and Fred really kind of took a bite out of the Saharan dust that was right off the coast of Africa, which kind of paved the way for this tropical wave, which is right off here just below the Cape Verde Islands. And if we look at the precipitable water, here's Fred way over here spinning off, and here comes the next wave, and you can see all the juicy atmosphere ahead. It's got plenty of moisture along the intertropical convergence zone to feed off of. Here's the latest tracks, which lead this next wave, if named, will be Grace, and this next wave looks to move off to the west-northwest in a general track, and the intensities keep it at a tropical storm level. A couple of models are starting to go up, and if we get a name to it, we'll see many more models start to feed into this system. Okay, so in a nutshell, I wanted to go back and recap for our area. For today, we're looking at southeast winds at or below 10 knots. If we get an easterly flow and a very slight gradient, we could see some low teens, very low teens later this afternoon. As we get into Saturday, we're looking at a slight build on east-northeast winds, and we could see 12 to 16 knots, and there is a little bit of potential for a stronger build should this high pressure build stronger to the northeast. So we'll have to really kind of watch that as the night goes on tonight and into tomorrow morning. As we get into Sunday, depending on this high pressure, it's probably going to be out here just entering the Atlantic and really driving this east-northeast flow into the coastline with a little bit of cooler air, as we saw in the models earlier for the air temperature. And we could be looking at a 14 to 18 knot flow on Sunday with potential for higher numbers. So we get an upper 70s airflow along the coastline. We could be looking at possible near 20 or even low 20s for northeast to east-northeast winds. So we'll have to take this one day to day as well. And as we get into Monday, the high pressure will move off a little bit further out to the east in the Atlantic, and then that flow will start to fade out. We'll probably go east-northeast or even east and start to see a southerly element come back up from this direction, and those winds will fade out on Monday. So we're probably looking at 10 to 14 or 11 to 15 knot easterlies, and that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report. Thank you.